This week, Conflict Zone is in Budapest, where the Hungarian government has come under sustained international criticism for its handling of the migrant crisis. My guest is the Foreign Minister Peter Szijjarto, who says they're just trying to defend their borders. But who's attacking them? Peter Szijjarto, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
The latest European summit looking at the situation of refugees and migrants papered over the cracks, talked about unity, spirit of solidarity and responsibility, but you're still part of the problem, aren't you?
Actually, no, I find words very important in this respect, but I find actions even more important.
Well, your action was to go against the quota system, which everybody else voted for, and which was pushed through by majority voting, wasn't it?
If you consider voting as an action, we can do it. I pretty much think that it was a wasted time that we have dealt with this dispute, because the time since we have started the debate about 120 migrants, how to be 120,000 migrants, how to be relocated, there were much more than 120,000 migrants coming into Europe.
Yeah, but if you couldn't agree on 120,000, how are you going to agree on all the others?
Well, I think that we have to set a very clear list of priorities. And the first on this list of priorities should be defending our borders. Because until we defend our borders, we are not able to say how many migrants we have to relocate. I understand,
but this was the first step. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees said this was an important first step in a united European response to managing the crisis. But you've called for unity, and you stood out against this move.
But I think that...
supposed to be unified.
I think it's a wrong order. Because first we have to defend our borders. And after we have done effective actions in order to defend our borders, then afterwards we can come to other issues, like the quota system.
Currently, but the fact is you don't want any
because
of the migrants, do you?
Currently we don't support the quota system. And if you allow me, I tell you why. Because I think it's very, very complicated to implement. Do not use the expression impossible to implement, because no one could answer why 120,000. Where are going to be the hotspots? It is said that relocation is only possible from hotspots, but there's no agreement where these hotspots are going to be, how they're going to look like, what kind of legal situation they'll have. Then there's this secondary migration. No one could answer how we will tackle that challenge, because look, if there are migrants relocated in Hungary or Romania, Slovakia, they will have one clear objective. They would like to go to Germany as soon as possible, and you cannot put an obstacle to that. How will
nobody's asking you to put an obstacle, but you came out even against the small number that would probably come to you. You're a country of 10 million. You wouldn't be asked to take more than 5,000 at the very most from this 120,000, and you stood out against it.
Yeah,
you
right,
said it was stupid, and you said you may even go to court.
No, the problem is that that it was totally nonsense to speak about this quota system. Because
it would have been a sign of unity, Peter Szijjarto. They were looking for unity. You were looking for unity, and yet when it came to the crunch, you stood out against it.
Well, if you are curious what I would like to say on that, and if you allow me to answer your question, maybe that would make sense here, that there need to be a list of priorities. And it doesn't make sense, and did not make sense, to speak about these quotas for such a long time, because we don't know how many migrants will arrive to Europe. And we do not have to start with tackling the consequences of the challenge. First, we have to address the challenge itself. And the problem is that no one takes care about addressing the challenge, actually. That's why we have put forward a proposal, saying that first Europe has to gain back the control over her borders. Until we don't do so, we will not be able to tackle this whole challenge. We can treat the consequences in a minor way, but believe me, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, control the borders and pay other countries like Jordan and Turkey to manage the problem. Yeah?
That would be second.
So you pay someone else to manage your problem?
No.
Because at the core of this, Peter Szijjarto, is the fact that you don't want any of these migrants at all. Irrespective of whether they want to come here.
This is not true.
You don't want any, do you?
No, this is not true. Let's stick to the facts and be fair towards each other. I understand that there's an international campaign in the media against Hungary, but at least when we sit face to face to each other, we should be correct and fair towards each other. I think there should be a very clear distinction between economic migrants and refugees. And we spoke very clearly.
People are making that distinction.
No. Just wait a minute. Hungary has always given shelter for refugees, and we will keep on doing so. But we were very clear. We are not in a shape to accept economic migrants. And I think that Europe is not in a shape to accept hundreds of thousands and millions of economic migrants. Because don't have illusions.
Nobody's talking about millions.
No. But this is going to be...
Except you, of course.
But this is... No. And UN and all other internationally authorized figures, because, and this is the main point, I think, we have to put into consideration that there are 8 million people living on humanitarian aid in Iraq. There are 12 million people living on humanitarian aid in Syria. There are 12.5 million IDPs in sub-Saharan region, and I didn't speak about Libya,
internally displaced
Yemen.
people.
Yeah, right. Yemen, Libya, Afghanistan, Pakistan. So what is the situation? There's an unlimited resource of supply of people who can become refugees or migrants in 1 or 2 seconds.
So you throw out the figure of 35 million. You don't know whether it's 35 million or not, do you?
It's 30 to 35 million according to UN and other evaluations like EU.
But nobody knows whether that figure is right.
Yeah, but UN and EU says that. Sorry, just once again, stick to the facts, because now you say no one knows whether these figures are right or not. EU and UN says that. Just to stick to the facts.
And in the middle of this, your Prime Minister says he wants to protect Christian values in Hungary. So he doesn't want Muslims coming here. Those arriving, he said, have been raised in another religion. We're sticking to facts. Most are Muslims. Is it not worrying in itself that European Christianity is now barely able to keep Europe Christian? Suddenly you're guardians of European Christianity.
Well,
is that right?
as we have
I thought
been,
the Pope had the job.
As we have been a couple of times in the history, but let me just say something. What the Prime Minister has said is the following, that there are nations and countries in the European Union. And we think, and we are pretty sure, that all nations and all countries have the right to make a decision whether that country or nation would like to share her life with another community, with another significant community. Like France has made such kind of a decision. They share their life with a significant Muslim community. And we respect that. We don't comment on that. But
they don't discriminate on the grounds of religion.
Oh, we don't discriminate either.
No?
But no, because we have quite a number of Muslim people here in Hungary who are very successful, respected members of the society. But
how many?
But the Hungarian society has not made a decision. To share our life with another big significant community in the country. And I think that should be respected by everyone else. As we respect the decisions of other nations, we expect other nations to respect our right to decision as well.
So that is discrimination, isn't it? Because if they were Christian, you wouldn't have a problem with them.
No, it's not.
You wouldn't have a problem with Christians, would you?
No, as I told you, we have refugees in Hungary without looking at their religion. If someone comes here to have a shelter, we give it. We have given it quite a lot of times recently. But if you have refugees, you don't have it because you would like to announce it. Because as soon as you announce that you have refugees, then you bring danger on their heads. So it's very, very hypocritical that when someone is announcing that I have so many refugees, you bring danger. You bring danger on their heads. So if you have refugees, you shouldn't announce.
And in seeking to protect Christian values, which Christian values dictate that you use water cannon and pepper spray against people who have come from war-torn areas?
And what they have done. Why was tear gas and water cannon used? Do you know that?
Well, it was yes, I do.
Do you know that?
There was violence, but there was violence in Greece and there was violence in Sweden, but they didn't use those methods, did they?
I'm pretty sure you have seen the pictures and the broadcasts, and you have seen that there was a very aggressive group of migrants who attacked the Hungarian police for hours by throwing stones and pieces of concrete on the Hungarian policemen who were in Hungary, and the attack was coming from a territory of another country. You think it's acceptable?
Mr. Szijjarto,
sorry, do you think it's acceptable?
No, Mr. Szijjarto, you
put
them on trains, you took them off trains, they didn't know what was happening, some of them had lost everything. What did you think they were going to do?
But why did we leave the former topic? Because I'm right, or why?
No, I'm taking it on to the essence of it, which is that other places had violence as well. They handled it in a different way, didn't they?
You are sure about that?
Yeah, the Serbian minister, Alexander Vulin, said the migrants' frustration was understandable. He said Hungary had to show it's ready and capable to accept these people.
You know, we will never accept such kind of people, just to be very frank and open to you, because we will never let such kind of people in the country who commit an attack against Hungarian police people for hours, throwing stones and throwing pieces of concrete. Why don't you ask about the current condition of that 14 Hungarian policemen who were injured in that attack? Why don't the commentators say anything about that? Why don't commentators...
Actually, they have, because in reading for this interview, I saw your comments, which were reprinted faithfully in other papers, talking about Hungarian police who've been injured. But your own former Prime Minister, Ferenc Gyurcsány, said on September the 15th that you deliberately allowed the situation here to get worse. It wouldn't have cost much, he said, to put up a few hundred more tents and print some leaflets in Arabic. He's got a point, hasn't he?
In Hungary, we have always been trying our best to supply the migrants who are coming into Hungary according to the international conventions. We have established the camps, we have established the tents. There we provide the migrants with medical assistance. There they are supplied with water and food. But most of them, or a big part of them, especially after the German statement saying that they are welcome in Germany, they just refused going into these refugee camps. And outside of these camps, when they occupy public areas, railway stations, we will not supply them there, because we have an obligation to supply migrants and refugees in the refugee camps where supply has been ensured according to international regulations. But no one should expect us to supply these people when they invade and occupy public areas and railway stations.
You say, according to international regulations, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said on September the 17th he was appalled by the recent actions of your government and authorities in relation to the migrants and refugees. He said some of your actions amount to clear violations of international law, and he cited the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, 1951 Refugee Convention, and the Convention Against Torture. So your message that you're going by the regulations is not much appreciated.
I'm looking forward to see the gentleman in Hungary. I am absolutely open for discussions and consultations. I can show him around the camps, the establishments. We had the Commissioner for Migration from European Commission. We have shown him the establishments, the camps. We have had a long discussion. Nothing like this came up to the surface.
He deplored what he called xenophobic and anti-Muslim views that he said appear to lie at the heart of your government's policy and reflected in a blatantly xenophobic government poster campaign earlier in the year.
I have to refuse. Because it's not true. We are not xenophobic, and I refuse it.
Do you also refuse or reject the idea that you're whipping up fear unnecessarily over the migrants? I mean,
what do you mean? What do you mean under that? Sorry, let's stick to this point. Okay. What do you mean under that?
I mean by this, 21st of September, what your Prime Minister Orban said, he said, they're overrunning us, talking about the migrants. They're not just banging on the door, they're breaking the door down on top of us. Hungary is under threat, so is the whole of Europe.
Yeah, because...
Clearly inflammatory, isn't it?
No.
Designed to scare.
If you have 10,000 people on a daily basis coming through your border illegally, without any willingness to cooperate with your authorities, then I think it's unacceptable. Because a state is a state because it has borders and is able to defend its borders, and borders have to be respected, and our laws have to be respected. And our laws say it very clearly how you can cross the border of Hungary. And if there are thousands, tens of thousands coming on a daily basis, breaking your law, coming illegally through your border, rejecting any kind of cooperation with your authorities. That's something what we cannot accept and will not accept in the future either.
Mr. Szijjarto, under threat from a bunch of mostly war-torn, war-weary travellers who don't even want to stay here in Hungary. They want to pass through and go somewhere else. And that is regarded as a major threat to your security.
But do you think it's
they're unarmed?
Do you think it's normal that and acceptable that people coming from point A to point B can cross borders as they just want because there are many of them? Do you think so?
Well, the UN says they are moving, instead of illegally, irregularly.
And illegally. Because you can cross the border in two ways, legally or illegally. Schengen regulation is very, very complicated, but there are very easily understandable parts in it. Schengen regulation says that the only way to cross Schengen border legally can be through a appointed border crossing point during opening hours, and it is the core responsibility of the member state at the border to ensure that.
The UN Human Rights Commissioner says that seeking asylum is not a crime, and neither is entering a country irregularly. Many have made harrowing sea journeys to avoid other border fences.
At the border crossing points, there's a possibility for everyone to submit requests for asylum. So we comply with this regulation. But can I just raise a question, not to you, I mean just generally, that what kind of threat these people are facing in Croatia or in Serbia? Because I think that there's no real reason they have to cross the border between Croatia and Hungary illegally, hurrying in that method as they have been doing so. What kind of threat they are facing in Croatia? Because I think none.
You've raised the question, but what kind of threat do they represent to you? Your Prime Minister talked about Hungary under threat, Europe under threat. What exactly is the nature of this threat?
If you are not able to control your borders, and if you are not able to put an obstacle for tens of thousands of people, 240,000 this year, until this morning from 1st of January, if you cannot put an obstacle and if you cannot defend your borders,
okay, but what are you afraid of? What are you afraid they'll do when they're here? What are you afraid they'll do when they're here? What are you afraid they will do when they're here?
No, come on,
passing through. What are you afraid of?
Come on, you think it's normal and acceptable that borders of European Union member states can be crossed as people just want that, or it should be regulated? What is your answer on that?
It's not up to me to make an answer. I'm merely putting to you what other officials have said.
That's my answer, and I refuse all kind of accusations and allegations which are just not fair to Hungary.
But you've had a powerful and public indictment of your handling of the refugees, and your excuse is that you're simply following EU law.
Yes, we do. We have been following EU law because we are members of the European Union. We have to follow Schengen rules and we have to follow Dublin rules. Now that's another issue, whether Dublin rules are working or not.
And the door is being brought down on your head, as the Prime Minister said. They're bringing down the door on your head.
Yeah, right.
I want to ask you one thing. Is your culture and your way of life so fragile that a few refugees and migrants, few relative to the 10 million people that you have here.
240,000 people you are speaking about.
Relative to the number of people you have here, that they threaten your way of life, they threaten your religion. Is it so fragile here in Hungary that they represent that huge threat to you?
I think we Hungarians have to ask everyone, even our German friends and other European friends, to respect our culture and respect our feelings, and respect that we would like to live our lives according to complying with the EU regulations. And it's totally unacceptable for us that there are more than 240,000 people until today, this year, who just cross the Hungarian border as they want. This is an unacceptable situation, and this is what we will stop for sure.
You want to abide by EU law and regulations, and you want to protect Christian values.
Yeah, protecting Christian values is a general effort here in Hungary, of course. We have been a Christian country.
Isn't there a slight irony
during our history?
That last year the European Court of Human Rights said your Church Act violated rights to freedom of thought, conscience, freedom of association, and which you had agreed to in the European Convention on Human Rights. So on the one hand, you're trying to protect Christian values, but on the other hand, you're restricting freedom of worship in this country.
No, we don't.
According to the European Court of Human Rights.
Okay, we don't agree with that, but of course...
Slight irony there,
sorry?
isn't there? Slight irony there, isn't there?
No, we don't agree with that court ruling, but of course the preparation of amending the law has underbeen preparation because we respect the decision, but we don't agree with it.
You brought a law in 2012. You forced all churches to go through a re-regulation process.
Yeah,
while you discovered which you liked and which you didn't.
Yeah, but no. Just be fair and be correct. There were more than, as far as I remember, more than 300 churches in Hungary. In Austria, they have 9 or 11. In Slovakia, they have, as far as I remember, 13. So a very limited number. No one attacks Austria. No one attacks Slovakia. We had more than 300. You think it's realistic to have 300 churches in Hungary? No, definitely it's not.
What does it matter? Why does it matter to you whether they're 300
because,
or 500? Why does it matter?
Because as we had investigations, it turned out very clearly that a big bunch of these so-called churches were only founded in order to take advantage of some financial possibilities. That was so obvious.
There's also concern about the amount of hate speech that is allowed in some of your periodicals and newspapers here. In 2013, Zoltán Bayer, who's a member of the Fidesz party, he's a friend of the Prime Minister, he wrote a column calling for someone to get rid of the Roma community by any means. Are you familiar with what he said? 2013.
I don't remember all articles being written in 2013, but of course I reject all kinds of hate speech, I reject all kinds of discrimination, I reject all kinds of articles that can create bad feelings in communities in Hungary. Freedom.
He said they shouldn't be allowed to exist in no way. It needs to be solved immediately and regardless of the method.
Of course, I don't know the article you are citing, but as I told you once again, I always rejected hate speech and I always rejected discrimination, and that's all.
So why didn't the party say anything about this?
The party always says it's very, very clear that until Fidesz is in power in Hungary, no members of any minority here has to be afraid of anything. We will protect anyone.
And the Prime Minister didn't say anything about this either?
Yeah, the Prime Minister made it very clearly a couple of times in Parliament. I was there, that no one who belongs to a minority in Hungary has to be afraid. We will protect everyone. Until Fidesz is in power, they don't have to be afraid, you can be sure.
Because you could get the impression, perhaps, that since it was published and it wasn't ever withdrawn, that in an illiberal democracy, which I understand is what the Prime Minister wants to create here, that things like that don't matter so much.
When we speak about illiberal democracy, I think you have to be aware of the whole general picture. What we speak illiberal is in economic terms, that we think that some solutions called liberal in economy simply do not work currently in the new world order. So we have to look for new kinds of solutions regarding economy, once again I would like to underline, regarding economy, which then can be called illiberal because they are not liberal, they are against the former liberal school of economics. For example, state can be a good owner. For example, state really has a responsibility to create jobs where market is not allowed to, or not able to. So these kind of approaches we really do have in economy.
And illiberal isn't putting as much of the media as possible either under state control or under enterprises that are sympathetic to state control, as a senior State Department official said last year.
What do you mean?
He said that you had created a media climate in which most of the media enterprises were sympathetic to the government or owned by it or by friends of theirs.
You know, you should open Hungarian newspapers. You should watch Hungarian news on televisions. You should open web pages, and you can be sure that they are very, very critical to government. So you don't have to be afraid of freedom of media in Hungary.
They talked about papering over the cracks. They talked about working together at the latest EU summit. After all the things that have been said, and you've waded into the undiplomatic language, I think you called the Croatians' handling of the whole crisis pathetic. You've talked about the Greeks treating Europeans as idiots. How are you going to mend these fences? You did.
Myself?
Yes.
I never used that word.
No? You didn't?
Can be sure about it.
Actually, you said it would be good if the Greek government didn't treat Europeans as if they were idiots and instead took meaningful steps to protect its borders. That's what you're quoted as saying. The facts.
You know, under these circumstances, Hungary has been under attack for a couple of weeks now. And, you know, I can accept that under such emotional period with such challenges, there are some debates on the level of diplomacy.
This was a slanging match.
Sorry.
This was a slanging match,
yeah,
wasn't it?
or even beyond. But what I will never accept and will always react is when my country is being attacked in an unfair way. For example, when the Croatian Prime Minister or the Austrian Chancellor puts the 30s and 40s in Europe parallel to what has been happening currently in Hungary. I will never accept that. I will always react, and I am gonna be always tough. You can be sure in the future.
And you enjoy being the bad boy of Europe.
I don't.
You don't care.
You
don't care.
Sorry. You answer your own question on my behalf. No, I don't put this into this context. But if Germany was attacked on the same way as Hungary was attacked by the Austrian Chancellor or the Croatian Prime Minister, you would have reacted in the same way, I guess, as I have done so.
Well, I don't speak for the German government.
You don't, that's right.
Peter Szijjarto, thanks very much for being on Conflict Zone.
Thank you very much. Dankeschön.